The war that split Korea forever. Have you ever wondered why there are two Koreas? Why one Korea became a global economic powerhouse, while the other became one of the most isolated countries on Earth? The answer lies in a brutal conflict that changed history forever. A war that killed millions of people, involved the world's most powerful nations, nearly triggered a nuclear catastrophe, and left a division that still exists today. This is the story of the Korean War, the war that split Korea forever. Welcome to Past World. If you enjoy learning about history's most important events, make sure to subscribe and join us as we travel through the past. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. One Korea, one people. For thousands of years, Korea existed as a single. The Korean people shared the same language, culture, traditions, and history. But in 1910, Korea lost its independence when Japan annexed the peninsula. For the next 35 years, Korea remained under Japanese rule. During this period, Koreans faced political repression, cultural restrictions, and economic exploitation. Then came World War II. In 1945, Japan was defeated. Koreans celebrated their liberation and hoped to rebuild their country. But another problem quickly emerged. The world was entering a new era, the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union, once allies against Nazi Germany, were now rivals, and Korea found itself caught between them. Chapter 2. The division of Korea. At the end of World War II, American and Soviet officials agreed to divide Korea temporarily. The dividing line was the 38th parallel. The Soviet Union controlled the north. The United States controlled the south. Initially, this arrangement was supposed to be temporary. But tensions between the two superpowers increased. Soon, two separate governments emerged. In the north, Kim Il-sung established a communist government backed by the Soviet Union. In the south, Syngman Rhee led a government supported by the United States. Each claimed to be the rightful government of all Korea. Neither accepted the division. Both wanted reunification. The question was no longer if war would come. The question was when. Chapter 3. The invasion that started everything. The answer arrived on June 25, 1950, without warning. North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea. More than 75,000 soldiers, supported by Soviet tanks and artillery, surged southward. The South Korean army was caught completely off guard. North Korean troops advanced rapidly. Within days, Seoul, the capital of South Korea, had fallen. The invasion shocked the world. Many observers believed South Korea would collapse within weeks. But the war was only beginning. Chapter 4. The United Nations responds. The invasion triggered an international response unlike anything seen before. The United Nations condemned North Korea's attack. A multinational military force was assembled to defend South Korea. The largest contribution came from the United States. Soon, soldiers from many countries arrived to help stop the invasion. However, the situation remained desperate. North Korean forces continued pushing south. By August 1950, United Nations and South Korean troops had been forced into a small area around the city of Busan. This became known as the Busan Perimeter. It was South Korea's last line of defense. If it fell, the war would likely be over. Chapter 5. The Last Stand at Busan. The battle for the Busan Perimeter was intense. Day after day, North Korean troops launched attacks. United Nations forces fought desperately to hold their positions. The defenders suffered heavy casualties. But they refused to break. American air power and naval support helped slow the North Korean advance. Gradually, the offensive lost momentum. For the first time since the war began, the attackers had been stopped. This bought valuable time for a bold counterattack, one that would completely change the course of the war. Chapter 6. MacArthur's masterstroke. General Douglas MacArthur had a daring plan. Instead of continuing to fight directly against North Korean forces, he proposed an amphibious landing far behind enemy lines at Incheon. Many military experts opposed the idea. The harbor was difficult to navigate. The tides were unpredictable. Failure seemed highly possible. But MacArthur believed the risk was worth taking. On September 15, 1950, thousands of United Nations troops landed at Incheon. The operation was a spectacular success. North Korean supply lines were cut. Their forces became trapped. Seoul was liberated. What had seemed like certain defeat suddenly became a stunning victory. The momentum of the war had completely reversed. Chapter 7. Marching toward the north. With North Korean forces retreating, United Nations leaders faced a major decision. Should they stop at the 38th parallel, or should they continue into North Korea? They chose to continue. The goal was now complete reunification. Under South Korean, United Nations forces crossed into North Korea and advanced rapidly. Soon, they approached the Yalu River, which marked the border with China. This development deeply alarmed Chinese leaders. China feared hostile forces would soon stand directly at its frontier. Warnings were issued. But the advance continued. Then, China made its Chapter 8. China's surprise entry. In one of the greatest military surprises of the 20th century, hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers secretly entered North Korea. They moved mostly at night, avoiding detection. Then, in late 1950, they launched a massive offensive. United Nations troops were stunned. Chinese attacks came from multiple directions. The advance toward the Chinese border collapsed. Once again, Seoul fell into enemy hands. The war had entered a dangerous new phase. What had begun as a Korean conflict was now becoming an international war. Chapter 9. The Frozen Nightmare. One of the most famous battles occurred at the Chosin Reservoir. The conditions were horrific. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Weapons froze. Vehicles stopped functioning. Soldiers suffered severe frostbite. Many died simply from exposure to the cold. Surrounded by Chinese forces, United Nations troops fought their way out. The battle became legendary for the courage and endurance shown by the soldiers. Veterans later described it as one of the harshest experiences of their lives. Chapter 10. The nuclear question. As the war intensified, some leaders considered the use of nuclear weapons. General MacArthur believed atomic bombs could destroy Chinese military positions and end the conflict. But President Harry Truman strongly disagreed. He feared nuclear strikes could trigger a wider war involving the Soviet Union. Such a conflict might become World War III. The disagreement between Truman and MacArthur became so serious that Truman removed MacArthur from command. It remains one of the most controversial decisions in American military history. Chapter 11. A bloody stalemate. After dramatic advances and retreats, neither side could achieve victory. The front lines stabilized near the original dividing line. The war became a brutal stalemate. Soldiers fought over hills, trenches, and defensive positions. Some battles lasted weeks, others lasted months. Thousands of lives were lost for small pieces of territory. The conflict increasingly resembled the trench warfare of World War I. Despite enormous sacrifices, the front line barely moved. Chapter 12. The war in the sky. While fierce battles raged on the ground, a revolutionary air war unfolded above Korea. For the first time in history, jet fighters battled each other on a large scale. American F-86 Sabres fought Soviet-designed MiG-15s. The skies became a testing ground for the future of aerial combat. Pilots engaged in dangerous dogfights at high speeds. Many military historians consider these battles the birth of modern jet warfare. Chapter 13. The human cost. The Korean War left behind immense suffering. Millions of civilians were killed, wounded, or displaced. Entire cities were destroyed. Families were separated by the front lines. Many never saw each other again. Villages vanished. Homes were reduced to rubble. By the end of the conflict, more than 3 million people had lost their lives. The scars of the war would remain for generations. Chapter 14. The Armistice. After years of fighting, negotiations finally produced a ceasefire agreement. On July 27, 1953, an armistice was signed. The guns largely fell silent. A demilitarized zone, known as the DMZ, was established between North and South Korea. However, there was one major problem. No formal peace treaty was ever signed. Technically, the Korean War never officially ended. Even today, the two Koreas remain divided. Chapter 15. Korea today, more than 70 years later, the effects of the Korean War are still visible. South Korea transformed itself into one of the world's leading economies. Its technology, culture, and industries influence people around the globe. North Korea followed a very different path. The country remains isolated and heavily militarized. The border between the two nations remains one of the most heavily guarded frontiers on Earth. A conflict that began in 1950 continues to shape international politics today. Conclusion. The Korean War was far more than a regional conflict. It was one of the defining events of the Cold War. It brought together soldiers from across the world. It nearly escalated into a nuclear confrontation. And it permanently divided a nation that had once been united. The war ended with a ceasefire, but not with peace. And that is why the Korean War remains known as the war that split Korea. Thank you for watching Past World. If you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories from the past.